As we enter a new decade, what better time is there to look back on the best games of the past 10 years? If you haven't checked out my honorable mentions list, be sure to give that a watch to see games that didn't quite make it, but nonetheless deserved a nod. Before we get started, I'd set some ground rules to explain my choices, and those rules are that the game must have been released in North America between 2010 and 2019. I'm only including one game per series, so if there was a series with multiple games, I'm choosing my favorite one. No remakes of previous games, and I had to have played the game in its entirety. Since I worked full-time for most of the decade, you may see some titles that you feel may deserve to be on this list that aren't there, but that's only because the game boasted over 100 hours of gameplay, and this past decade especially, I had to pick and choose what I had the motivation and time to play. Instead, you're more likely to see select games that were shorter in length than some of the longer epics that were released in the past 10 years. And without further ado, let's get into the very first 5 of the top 10 games of the past decade. Vampyr is a dark and atmospheric action RPG by Don't Nod Entertainment, the makers of Life is Strange. The game revolves around Jonathan Reed, a doctor and World War I veteran who returns from battle only to receive the curse of becoming a vampire. Explore the foggy, lamplit streets of London and discover the supernatural sources of the spread of the sickness that ravages the city. In Vampyr, every decision you make matters. You can cultivate relationships with dozens of intriguing characters and heal them to save London, or feast on them to gain their strength, plunging the city into chaos. The icing on the cake is the soundtrack by Olivier Delavier, who melded industrial sounds and avant-garde cello that sets the mood brilliantly. Vampyr is a game that I found and bought completely on a whim, and in spite of slight imperfections with the game's mechanics, it quickly became my favorite game of 2018. Although this title has been the subject of contention over the years, I stand firm that not only is it underappreciated, but that Final Fantasy XIII is worthy of being one of the top games of the decade. Now let me explain. Among the many critiques I've seen, among the most valid is the point that the game begins with a fairly linear map. This is true for the first third or so of the game until you reach the planet Grand Pulse, and the entire experience expands into a sprawling open world format. Its linear beginnings don't even bother me because I had just come out of playing Final Fantasy IV and its claustrophobic, labyrinthian dungeons. Compared to that, Final Fantasy XIII's areas were a breath of fresh air. The game revolves around Lightning, a soldier who lives in the technologically advanced floating world of Cocoon. Her world is turned upside down when her sister Sarah accidentally becomes one of the forces that she's sworn to fight against. I'll always fondly remember immersing myself into Grand Pulse's stunning vistas, losing myself to the breathtaking music, planning my next move in the unique battle system, and utterly admiring Lightning for her strength, resolve, and transformation throughout the story. Next up, we have Fire Emblem Three Houses, a strategy RPG that I didn't expect to love as much as I did. In general, I don't tend to gravitate toward its tactical fighting style, but this game to me was worth expanding my horizons. The game starts out with you, Byleth, a mercenary who becomes a professor tasked with teaching one of the 3 houses of your choosing: the Golden Deer, the Blue Lions, or the Black Eagles. What begins as what seems to be a school dating sim quickly becomes so much more. It's a game about the consequences of war, the ideology that drives it, and the blurring of right and wrong. Depending on which house you choose, you can play up to 4 unique storylines, transforming what starts out as a medium-length RPG into a sprawling epic. And characters that you may fall in love with in one path may become your enemy in another. At its core, it's a story about how being there for someone and giving them the moral support they need, and even having the courage to question them when they go off track, can make all the difference in their lives and the lives of those around them. Renowned for its punishing difficulty and fascinating lore, From Software's Dark Souls sparked a series that inspired a genre. It's hard to quantify just how strong its impact has been on the gaming industry, and even my life in general. From the moment you awaken in a prison cell in the undead asylum and look up to see your rescuer bathed in golden sunshine, the themes of seeing little flecks of light in the darkness begin to unfold. Dark Souls features groundbreaking storytelling that isn't spoon-fed to the player, where every item has significance, and where the developers trust you to put together the pieces, or not. Even when you play the entire game not knowing what's going on, the gameplay can be its own reward. The enemies, areas, and bosses are incredibly challenging, but the sense of accomplishment you get from overcoming obstacles is like nothing else. Overall, Dark Souls is a game that makes the player feel invested and involved. The world is punishing and remains unchanged whether or not you're there, but what counts is your own journey, staying patient through hardships, and not giving up. Masters of Action and Storytelling, Platinum Games and Square Enix, teamed up with eccentric director Yoko Taro to bring us Nier Automata in 2017. What begins as a stylish action game about androids clearing out robots from the Earth in the far future slowly morphs into an existential masterpiece over 3 playthroughs that explore the perspectives of androids 2B, 9S, and A2. Although the later playthroughs can be emotionally grueling, it dares the player to contemplate what existence and humanity really means. With its depth on top of the smooth battle system Platinum is known for, along with one of the best soundtracks in gaming history, Nier Automata is an unforgettable experience. What did you think of these first 5 games in the best games of the decade countdown? And what'll you think will be in the top 5? If you'd like to support my ongoing content, check out my Patreon link down below and subscribe to my channel to find out what the final selections are. See you then!